Sicario is about the war on drugs and specifically the battle of the US agencies against the drug cartels south of the American border. It's a very violent film. There's a lot of brutality and blood and gore in this film, as well as quite heavy drug references. Now, the violence is mostly shooting violence. A lot of people get shot in this film. It does have a high body count. You do see victims lying in pools of blood after they have been shot, and you see bodies convulsing as they are sprayed with bullets and that kind of thing. There's a couple of torture scenes in the film. You don't actually see people being tortured, but the implication and suggestion is there. For example, in one scene, a man walks into an interrogation room with a whole bottle of water from a water cooler. So there's a suggestion there that he might be planning to waterboard the suspect. There's also a scene when a man is covered in blood. His head is very bloody and there's bloody cuts and gore over his face. And so you know he has been beaten. You don't see the beating happen. And then he's kind of tortured and played with a little bit afterwards. So he's pinched when he doesn't tell the truth about something and then given a wet willy of all things. In other scenes, there are explosions. So you see an explosion happen and there's a man kind of stumbles away from the explosion with quite a nasty open head wound. And you also see a dismembered arm lying nearby. You see a whole family being massacred in another scene. So the wife and children, you see them lying dead after this scene. You also see an underground tunnel scene where you hear the sounds of people being throat sliced. You don't actually see, again, you don't see the wound being inflicted, but you hear the sound of the stabbing or the slicing, and then you see the bodies lying on the ground afterwards. So a lot of violence, but a lot of it kind of happens off camera, so it's more the implication of how severe and how nasty this violence is. There's a lot of grim discoveries in this film. So quite a few corpses are seen. Some of them are found. There's a group of corpses, about 30 or 50 I think, which are found, and it's quite gruesome. So these people were obviously tortured or treated very badly before they were killed. So they're covered in blood. Some of them are stripped almost naked, and they're wrapped in plastic and this kind of thing. So it's quite gruesome. Likewise, you see bodies hanging from a bridge, and again they've been stripped either almost naked or completely naked, and you can see that they would have been mutilated before they were strung up. You also see photographs of victims of drug-related crime, and again you can tell that these people suffered quite badly at the hands of their perpetrator before they were killed. You see some of the victims with their hands tied behind their backs, or they've been blindfolded. They're lying again in pools of blood and debris. And there's one scene where it looks like a man is actually holding a decapitated head. So some pretty nasty visuals in the film, quite confronting. In one scene, there's a pub setting and a couple go home together. It appears that as though they're about to have sex. There's flirting and a bit of groping, and they're about to start undressing one another, and then they are interrupted. This is followed on by a scene of violence where the couple sort of tackle and wrestle one another. A gun is fired, but no one is shot. And the woman ends up pinned beneath the man while he appears to be choking her. She's almost strangled to death in this scene. So yeah, the violence is fairly consistent and solid throughout the film. But interestingly, even though the film is very much about drugs, you don't ever see anybody taking drugs in the film. You do see parcels of drugs being handled and shipped, so you see the drug trade kind of in progress, but you don't see anybody consuming the drugs, and you don't ever see any leaf or powder or anything like that. You do see a bit of alcohol. You see beer in that pub scene, plus you see someone drinking spirits, and you see glasses of wine on a table. There's also a fair bit of swearing in the film, so the F word is used quite a few times, as well as the S word. But it's a really interesting film, considering it is about drug lords and drug cartels, which has been covered in cinema a fair bit. Interestingly, this one is actually quite thought-provoking, and you can kind of look past a lot of the brutality and violence, because somehow you get the impression that despite what you see on screen, you kind of get the impression that it's probably a lot worse out there in the real world. So it's a very interesting film and quite thought-provoking, and if you don't mind an MA 15+ rated film, then it's absolutely worth seeing. Sicario is directed by Denis Villeneuve, and it stars Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin. And you can read my full, more detailed breakdown of the film at cinemum.net.